Hey guys, welcome to my channel. So for today's tutorial, we're going to be making this Cocomelon cake. To begin, I have 3 layers of an 8-inch cake, and I'm going to start rounding out the edges. So I'm starting at the bottom, just carving away until I get sort of a rounded shape on the bottom. And then I'm going to work on the top, so again, just rounding out those edges. When I first started carving this, I was using just a regular flat knife, and then I switched to a serrated knife, and this made it so much easier. This cut through the cake a lot easier than the smooth knife did. So just keep carving until you're happy with the shape. I ended up going back to the bottom of it and carving a little more. And then once you're happy, clean off the excess, and then we can start filling and stacking these layers. So I'm adding on my buttercream border. I did 2 layers of that buttercream border. Just because my filling is pretty thick, I'm using my strawberry and cream filling. So when you're adding in your filling, you want to make sure that you get it as flat as possible. I'm just smoothing that down, and then I'm adding on my second layer of cake. Again, adding filling, and then I added on my third layer. So I'm going in and closing up the gaps between the cake and the filling just to make sure that none of that filling pours out. And then we're going to go in with a crumb coat. So the crumb coat is just a thin layer of buttercream, and it's going to help trap in all of your crumbs. So now to smooth this cake, since it's rounded, I'm using an acetate sheet, and this was just a strawberry box, like a strawberry fruit box that I cut up, and I rounded out the edges, and this is what I'm using to smooth around the whole cake. Once you're done with your crumb coat, pop that into the fridge, and then we're going to add on a few more layers of buttercream. So I went with a total of 3 layers of buttercream. I think I only showed 2, but it ended up being a total of 3. Once you smooth out your buttercream, pop that into the fridge, and then we can work on coloring our fondant. So I'm going to make my fondant green. And when I do this, I like to work in small batches, so I'll do a small amount of fondant first. I'll get that to the desired color that I need, and then I'll do another small bit of fondant. Again, get that to the desired color, and then I'll combine those two, and so on and so forth. This makes it easier to color your fondant rather than doing one big ball of fondant at once. A big ball of fondant can be a little hard to manage, so this is just a little easier on your arms. Now once the color is completely combined, then I'm going to roll this out into a log and then flatten it. I rubbed a bit of shortening on top, and then I got my rolling pin and I dusted that with cornstarch. I also dusted my surface with cornstarch, and then I just began rolling. So when you're rolling out your fondant, you want to start in the middle and work your way outwards. And then I like to rotate my fondant as I'm rolling just to make sure it's not sticking to my surface. As you roll your fondant thinner, you'll realize that there's air bubbles, so I like to go in and pop those. And then just keep rolling until you get your desired thickness. And once you've reached that desired thickness, then you're going to drape your fondant over your cake. And doing a shape like this can be a bit tricky because the fondant wants to create a lot of pleats on the bottom. So to get rid of those pleats, you're going to stretch your fondant out, smooth down, and then just keep doing that all around the cake. To smooth this fondant, we obviously can't use a regular fondant smoother just because of the shape of this. So what I do is I grab a ball of fondant and I use that as my smoother. So you're going to smooth out the entire cake, and then you're going to trim off the excess and then pop that into the fridge. Now with some of the extra light green fondant that I had, I'm going to go in and dye that a darker green. So now for Cocomelon's face, I printed a picture and I made this 6 inches long, and I'm going to cut this out and use it as a template so I know exactly where all the facial features go, and I know exactly what size to cut everything to. Now to make the color of the face, I ended up combining a little bit of pink, red, and orange, and this gave me the perfect shade. So from there, just roll out your fondant, cut it out, and then put that to the side, and then we're going to work on all the black facial features. So for the nose and the mouth, I just rolled out pieces of black fondant and cut them and shaped them. to the right sizes. And again, I'm using the template as a reference to know exactly what sizes to cut everything to. And then for the eyes, it's the same thing. I cut out the eye from the template, and then I just cut this out with black fondant. Now to lay everything on, again, we're going to use the same template, and this is just going to help us know exactly where to put everything. And I'm gluing everything down with a little bit of water. So now to stick this onto, I just added some water to the back of the pink part on the face, and then I just kind of like slapped it on. This is a little risky. I was a little worried that I was going to completely mess up, but it ended up being fine. You might want to let it dry for maybe 5-10 minutes before you actually add it onto the cake. Now for Cocomelon's dark green stripes, I cut out strips of fondant. They're all different sizes. I did between 1/4 inch to 3/4 inch. And then I just started laying them on there. So when you're laying these dark green strips down, whatever you do to one side of the cake, you want to do to the other side, just so that it'll be nice and even in the end. You can see on top that I let a bunch of that fondant gather up. So what I ended up doing was I went in with a circle cookie cutter, and then I just gently pressed down and lifted up all of that excess. You're going to end up with the line of a circle on top, but that's completely okay because it's going to get covered up. So now I'm coloring some fondant hot pink. I'm rolling that into a ball and then just squishing it right on top of the center of his head. Now I'm going to work on all the white detailing for Cocomelon's face. So I have my fondant extruder. I'm filling this up with white fondant and then squeezing out a white rope. And this is going to go all around the border of his face. So I'm adding a little water onto the cake, and this is going to act as my glue. I ended up having to trim down the dark green fondant just because I didn't want the white to have to overlap. I wanted it to be nice and smooth. And now we're going to add a little shadow to his forehead and then some white into his eyes. And now to finish up the face, we're going to give Cocomelon its rosy cheeks. So I just use a hot pink petal dust and I just dab that on with a fluffy brush. Now I decided to add the little ladybug. So for this, you're just going to roll out a red ball of fondant, a black ball of fondant. I scored down the center of the red ball of fondant, and then I went in with a little ball tool and just indented. And then I filled in those indents with black fondant. After the spots, I went in and made the legs. So each side is just going to get 3 little legs, and then those are going to get tucked under his body. Now for the eyes, I just squished 2 big balls of white fondant on the head, and then I added 2 smaller balls of black fondant. Now for Cocomelon's antenna, ideally I would have used wire for this, but I didn't have any on hand. So what I did was I just shaped, cut, and glued toothpicks together. This actually worked perfectly fine. I was a little nervous, but it was totally fine. Once you're happy with the shape of the wire or the toothpick, whatever it is you decide to use, we're going to roll out some dark purple fondant, and then we're going to just cut it to the shape of the toothpick. And then I just added some water and wrapped this around, squeezing it together to hide the seams. I had a little excess on it, so I went in with some scissors and just trimmed that. You're going to roll out a blue ball of fondant and then stick that to the very top. I made mine the night before, which I really recommend doing. If you have the time, make them ahead so that they can have time to dry. This is going to make them extra sturdy. From here, we're just going to add the ladybug, and I chose to add this with a toothpick for support. Could have probably just done this with a little water, but I didn't want to risk it moving around on me. So I added the body first, and then I went in and added the head. And then I gently stuck in the antenna. So from here you're basically done, but I decided to go in with my steamer and steam the entire cake because I had a lot of extra cornstarch on it. So after that, our Cocomelon cake was complete. I think this cake came out super cute. Let me know your guys' thoughts, and if you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave that all down below, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you for watching.